Paula needs a parachute. So, Salesforce Customer 360 unites your marketing, sales, commerce, service, and IT teams around her so they can deliver a great experience from anywhere. Paula needs a parachute. So, Salesforce Customer 360 unites your marketing, sales, commerce, service, and IT teams around her so they can deliver a great experience from anywhere. Paula needs a parachute. So, Salesforce Customer 360 unites your marketing, sales, commerce, service, and IT teams around her so they can deliver a great experience from anywhere. Paula needs a parachute. So, Salesforce Customer 360 unites your marketing, sales, commerce, service, and IT teams around her so they can deliver a great experience from anywhere. Paula needs a parachute. So, Salesforce Customer 360 unites your marketing, sales, commerce, service, and IT teams around her so they can deliver a great experience from anywhere. Paula needs a parachute. So, Salesforce Customer 360 unites your marketing, sales, commerce, service, and IT teams around her so they can deliver a great experience from anywhere. Paula needs a parachute. So, Salesforce Customer 360 unites your marketing, sales, commerce, service, and IT teams around her so they can deliver a great experience from anywhere.
Hello and welcome to the Texas Tribune Festival. My name is Jolie McCullough and I am the criminal justice reporter at the Texas Tribune. Today we're going to be talking about criminal justice reform in the 87th legislative session. I am joined today by the two co-chairs of the House Criminal Justice Reform Caucus. We have Representative Joe Moody, a Democrat from El Paso. Hello. And we are also joined by State Representative Jeff Leach, who is a Republican from Plano.
Hey there.
Hey.
Good to be with you.
Yeah. Well, thank you both for joining me today. Virtually, I know, unfortunately, I wish we could all be hanging out, but these are trying times we live in.
It's okay. Jeff and I got to hang out a lot recently this summer, so we're good.
Yeah, you guys are going to be.
Yeah, but you were gone. You were gone for most of the time. I wish we could hang out more.
Don't worry, got more time. Got more time ahead.
We're just going to breeze right over that little bit of tension, which we'll get into later. Don't worry. So I wanted to talk about, this session in the House, especially we have House Speaker Dave Phelan made criminal justice reform a priority. He had his package of bills first effort in the House to move some issues forward on things like bail, policing, the death penalty, criminal or civil asset forfeiture. There was just a whole slew of things. And there was really, at the end, there was some tension between the House and the Senate, as well as with the governor's office. So I'm wondering if you could just broadly tell me, do you think that this year was a success or a failure in terms of criminal justice reform? And whoever wants to start, I want both of you to answer. So.
Joe, I'll defer to you first.
I mean, every session has its successes and failures. But the fact that the Speaker of the House has labeled criminal justice reform as a marquee item for him personally, and putting that stamp on the House agenda, that's success. That's a win. You look back at prior speakers, school finance reform under Speaker Bonin became a marquee item, or mental health reform under Speaker Strauss before that became a marquee item. That means that this is an item that's not going away under this leadership and is going to continue to elevate. And it means that all members of the legislature, not just, Jeff and I have worked on these issues for our entire time in the legislature. And sometimes, it's challenging to get other people engaged on these very complex issues when you're dealing with very challenging issues, the death penalty, sexual assault, things of this nature. And so it's challenging to get people involved in it. But when you raise it to that level and you say, look, we're going to tackle this, over and over and over again, and sometimes it takes time to get that done. That is something that I would consider a success. Now, did we get things across the finish line to the governor's desk that we wanted to? No, but that's every session. So I'd say the broad success of this session is we have the House has laid a marker down, the Speaker's laid a marker down. The criminal justice reform is something that has a home and a place in the Texas House, and that's not going to change anytime soon.
Yeah, I agree strongly with that. I think that's well said. You'd be hard pressed to find another legislative body, another legislative chamber, I think anywhere in the country that has made criminal justice reform more of a priority in recent months and years than the Texas House. I'm saying that a little bit off the cuff and without looking at every single state, but I know for a fact that we, in the Texas House, we have not been afraid of these issues. And Republicans and Democrats have come together in recent years to build the foundation for what you saw this session. And that's a collaborative effort to shine a spotlight in some areas that have for a long time needed a bright light shined, to bring these issues to the forefront, to talk about them together, even when we've disagreed on what the ultimate solutions may have been. And under the leadership of our Speaker, and I believe a very collaborative effort by our Criminal Justice Reform Caucus and House members from all across the state, from both parties, the most conservative and liberal members coming together saying these are issues that we got to talk about. Unfortunately, in this area, at least, you got to pass it through two chambers. And there was some disagreement and strong pushback from our colleagues on the Senate. And I'm hopeful that we could just continue to work together to shine a light on these issues and get our senators to take note and make this more of a priority on their chamber, in their chamber next session.
Yeah, so that kind of gets to, you're both talking about in the House, right? And the House has clearly made this a priority, but as you said, like there's two chambers in the legislature, and a lot of the issues that were on the priority list for the House this year didn't really go anywhere in the Senate. They fell flat. They didn't get committee hearings. They didn't sometimes even get referred to committees. Do you think like this is a political climate, and especially as things are getting more divisive and as we've seen over the last several months, do you think this is something, is criminal justice reform in the current political climate possible to actually, cross that finish line?
I'll take this first, because I think the reason that we didn't get more traction in the Senate is because we had some conservative Republican leaders on that side who don't believe that criminal justice, at least in terms of the House's approach to criminal justice, is the way that we should go. It's not necessarily that they disagreed with us on the ultimate issues, although there definitely were some policy disagreements. But the House has made this a priority because the members of the House have made this a priority, and the Speaker gratefully has empowered us to make it a priority for the House. On the Senate side, speaking as a conservative Republican to my conservative Republican friends in the Senate, I would say they need to take note. This needs to be an issue that conservative Republicans not just talk about, not just maybe delve around or discuss around the edges, but this needs to be a centerpiece priority for conservative Republicans now and in the future. We're talking about issues of justice, the rule of law, life and liberty, the Constitution, second chances, getting fathers back to their homes and out of prison when they can be rejuvenated and restored and revived and become productive, tax-paying members of society. These are issues that are core to what the Republican Party says we stand for. And so I think it should be a centerpiece issue for our legislative agenda going forward. And that's one of my big priorities here in the interim in advance of next session.
Representative Moody, anything to add on the current political climate?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what you heard right there from Chairman Leach is exactly why this is the policy arena that's going to lead us back to collaboration. A lot of folks have looked at the events over the last several months in the Texas legislature and elsewhere in national politics in general, and said this is divisive. People are pulling apart and polarizing, and that's true in some in some arenas. For the last decade, this has been an issue where Democrats and Republicans have looked at each other across the aisle and have collectively said, I hear you. I hear what Jeff is saying about life and constitutional issues and things that are bringing him to the table and his constituents to the table on these very issues. And he hears me when I talk about restorative justice and mercy and collateral consequences and making sure that we don't have disparate outcomes for people because of the color of their skin or because of the neighborhood they grew up in. And so those are things that we can talk about on multiple levels, and they intersect. And so that's what's made criminal justice reform a bipartisan agenda item for some years now. And it is what will allow us to be building bridges going forward and not falling into the same polarization that we see in other policy arenas.
So you mentioned, like in the House, there was a lot of movement, and then obviously, not necessarily that success on all fronts overall. What were some of the biggest priorities for both of you this, I want to say session, but there's been 3 of them now this year, that did make it across or that you were really disheartened to see fail?
Joe, you go first.
Yeah, look, I'll start with, I'm happy to talk about something that was disheartening, getting some distance from it, but I also know that the journey's not over for second look. second look bill is about young offenders who were convicted to extremely harsh sentences back during the tough on crime era in Texas. And honestly, and I didn't mention this before, or one of the reasons why criminal justice reform is a bipartisan effort today is because over-criminalization and mass incarceration was a bipartisan problem that was created in Texas. And so the solution has to be bipartisan. And so part of what we saw out of that tough on crime era was an inordinate amount of young people sentenced to very harsh sentences. And so we were able to move second look, which would give an opportunity, not a parole, not a mandatory parole, but an opportunity for youthful offenders who had exhibited changes in the system to give them a meaningful opportunity at parole at an earlier stage. And we got that through both the House and the Senate to the governor's desk. The governor ultimately vetoed that bill, had a good conversation with his office after that about the issue that they had specifically with the bill, and the core constructs of the bill were not something they had an issue with. And so we're already working diligently to address those concerns. We have a draft of a bill that I think is ready today. I'm really happy to see if he puts it on the special session call this third time around. We can pass it now, but we can address those concerns. And so the fact that ended up on the veto, kind of veto pile was certainly disheartening. It's the first time it's ever happened to me in my career in the legislature. But the fact that it got to the governor's desk and we're in a dialogue with the governor in a state like Texas who thought nothing of those people. When I started in the legislature, no one cared about those people. They were less than human. They were an afterthought of anybody that walked the halls in the Capitol. And now, you've got people all over the political spectrum that are aware of second look, that understand that there are notions of mercy and justice and how those things intersect. And so that's important. We have the governor involved in a dialogue about it. And I would consider that, even though it is heartening end to the story this session, something that has a very positive outlook going forward.
What do you think what it was needed to be changed? Like, what were the concerns from the governor's office, and what does the new draft look like?
There was a jury instruction piece that they were concerned about. And while I think the concern was well placed, I think it would have actually impacted a very small number of cases going forward. So I get it, understand it. Certainly was an issue to be addressed. Hadn't been brought up during the legislative process, but I think it was mainly because it wouldn't have that big of effect on cases going forward, but it would have some, and they wanted to make sure that was clarified before they signed the bill into law. So we've got that draft ready, and we're happy to drop it in at any time.
Chairman Leach, do you have any? What were the biggest items?
Well, I was certainly disappointed, frustrated that bill got vetoed. Certainly wish those concerns had been addressed during session when we still had a chance to make those changes before getting it to the governor's desk. And Representative Moody, I'm happy to join you in filing that bill and calling for it to be on the special session call, because that's a really important piece of legislation. And when we talk about second chances and talk about, as I mentioned earlier, the fact that right now incarcerated all across the state for crimes that were committed long ago, in many cases, non-violent, non-sexual related crimes. These are folks who right now pose no real threat to society, but can offer such great benefit in terms of getting employed, becoming tax-paying citizens, being back home with their families and helping raise their kids so kids aren't stuck in fatherless homes. Those things make all of us better, and I would argue safer. And so that bill certainly is one that I care a lot about. Another one is one that I filed relating to the use of the death penalty, narrowing the use of the death penalty in law of parties cases, like Jeff Wood's case, who's currently sitting on death row, and the Texas Tribune has done such a great job covering that and other cases. And the fact that these bills can overwhelmingly, not just that, but there are other examples, overwhelmingly pass the House and not even get a hearing on the Senate side, just because of a few voices on the Senate side that disagree, I would argue don't really even understand the policy, is really frustrating. So we're going to continue to work on these. As I said, we're also going to engage other communities and industries. The business community is taking a very unique, fresh approach, exciting look at criminal justice issues and how these impact businesses across the state. And so I hope that as we engage those businesses and those communities, chambers of commerce, Rotary clubs across the state, Republicans and Democrats, I hope that they will in turn speak out to the governor, to the lieutenant governor, and to their elected officials at all levels to talk about the importance of these issues.
And I just want to clarify, so the law of parties, for those who are not aware, basically you can be sentenced to death in Texas if you were an accomplice, or you were, in Jeff Wood's case, in a truck outside when a robbery was happening and the robbery became a murder. You don't necessarily have to have known that there was a murder going to happen, but the language is that you should have anticipated that something like a robbery could turn into a murder.
Yeah, and when that bill passed the House, I went over and started to work it on the Senate side, and just the fact that we got that out of the House so overwhelmingly bipartisan, a death penalty bill on the House was not due to Jeff Leach or Joe Moody. I mean, these House members, they care about these issues. They really care about these issues. Otherwise, it wouldn't have got such overwhelmingly bipartisan support. But when I walked onto the Senate side and I talked to Senate colleagues that should support these bills, there was such misinformation. That a couple of them said to me, "Well, Jeff, this bill would prevent the Texas 7 being executed for what happened in the murder of that police officer." And I specifically said on the floor of the Texas House and in committee hearing, and throughout the debate of the bill, that no, this bill was drafted in such a way that it would not apply to the Texas 7, where an accomplice knew about the murder, helped plan the murder, and but for his or her participation in the commission of the crime, the murder would not have taken place. That is totally separate from this bill. There was just such misinformation and lack of interest in learning about the bill on the Senate side that was really, really unfortunate. But I believe we could break through that here in the interim.
Yeah, and that's what I want to ask. Like, how do you do that? Like, because you say you're a conservative member, and in the House, conservative colleagues have joined this, but in the Senate, it seems there's a lot of there's a wall. It hits a wall a lot of the time. So how are you hoping to break through that?
Very, very simply and short and sweet. I believe that those guys, and I offer this to my Senate colleagues, it should go with me to death row, which I know we've been there. Julie, I think you've been there, to death row, sit down with me and meet Jeff Wood and hear his case. And if they hear Jeff Wood's case, they learn about it, they wrap their arms around it, they understand that he's been in prison going on 26, 27 years when he did not have the requisite mens rea, I believe that they would walk out of there not just voting for the bill, but fighting as to who would support and author the bill on the Senate side. They just got to be willing to learn, like I was willing to learn 10 years ago when I first entered the legislature and didn't know a whole lot about these issues. We can do it. We just got to work hard at it.
This is a point that has to be made. When you talk about, there's a lot of naysayers out there talk about, well, it doesn't mean anything that Jeff Leach passed the bill in the House. It doesn't mean anything that we got intellectual developmental disability that spawned from the Bobby Moore case passed in the House. It doesn't matter that we got jury instructions on death penalties passed in the House. It doesn't matter that we got writ relief that addressed another Texas Supreme Court passed in the House. There are a lot of naysayers out there that think that this is an all or nothing business. And I want to tell them very clearly, that success that we've had will make a difference someday. Just like Jeff said right now, he said that I took the time 10 years ago, and it took 10 years to get that bill off the House floor. When I first started in the Texas House, and I've been I served in the Criminal Jurisprudence Committee almost all the sessions I've been there, that bill, the Law of Parties bill, never had any real chance to get anywhere, ever. And now not only is it a marquee bill being carried by a Republican chairman, it is a bill that went off the House floor. Jeff, I don't remember the votes against it, single digits maybe. I mean, so for those out there that, look, I get frustrated too. I get flustered too, because I'd love for everything that I come up with in my brain that I think is good criminal justice policy to become law the next day. But that's not how the legislature works. And it's tough. We didn't get in this bind of mass incarceration and overcriminalization overnight, and we're not going to work our way out of it overnight either. So I want people in this business who are not cynical to stay hardened, because it is difficult work, but the work that's worth doing is always going to be challenging. And so I think that's an important lesson that we can learn from Jeff's story about law of parties. And I think a good story that can be learned about many of the other bills that we've seen be successful in the House. And ultimately, the Senate's going to have the same experience. They're always a little slower than we are, and that's okay. But we'll forgive them for now, and know that change is coming in their chamber as well.
So I kind of want to, this session was focused a large amount on conservative priorities, some of those being criminal justice related, bail, for example, which just passed in the third legislative session. I know there was a lot of discussion, obviously, after the murder of George Floyd on police reforms. Ultimately, a few simple changes came through, but the larger reforms, some of which passed the House, did not pass the Senate. Do you think, there's been a lot of criticism lately I've heard from advocates of, Texas used to be the gold standard for states in general on just how to move forward in a bipartisan way on criminal justice reform. Do you think where we are now, where the focus lies now, that Texas still holds that status?
I think we have the most opportunity to do the most good. We're the largest state that's engaging in look, it's not, none of these tasks are easy. And as I said, there were a lot of these issues that were created by what I would call hang 'em high Democrats when they controlled this state. They thought the way to prove that they weren't super liberal or too soft or whatever is they had to be tough on crime. So it was easy for them to have mandatory minimums and set up a system of mass incarceration. So all of that is ingrained in some history of our own party. And I certainly that's been a problem in kind of an old school conservative thinking too. But those things have started to flip over. So a state like Texas doesn't move very quickly. The ship of state is something that turns very slowly, and that's the nature of it. People in the advocacy world that don't think that this is going the right direction, I think maybe don't recall what it was like 10 years ago, 12 years ago. This dialogue and this discussion has changed drastically, and it's going to continue to. And we have the 6 different death penalty reform bills passing in the Texas legislature. You have broad drug policy reform passing in the Texas House. Again, does it get to the governor? Not yet, but it's going to get there. And in fact, when we tip the balance like that in this state, it's not just going to be in our state. That's going to tip the balance in a number of other states. And so, yes, we still have the opportunity to lead the way, and we have to push through the noise. There are people that create a lot of noise in this arena. There's a lot of knee-jerk reactions in this arena, and we need to push back against that and make sure that we don't fall into unsound policy and continue just to do the good work that we can together.
And I think the main point of this was the bail bill. There was the main contention over the bail bill. So I guess, advocates, a lot of Democrats were thinking of that as not as a step backward in terms of increased detention, in that the bail bill would more heavily rely on cash bail in some instances. So do you think, and I'd love to hear from both of you on this, like how the bail bill will affect Texas criminal justice reform, or the bail law now that it's been signed into law?
Joe, I'm going to defer to you on that again.
Sure.
You're the expert on bail.
Well, I thought I was. No, look, the problem we ran into with efforts around bail is that they were born out of a situation where the goal was to reduce preventive detention. And then you have a very tragic case involving Damon Allen that garnered a lot of attention, and deservedly so. And there was something that people wanted to address.
The highway trooper who was killed by someone who was out on a cash bond. Allegedly.
Correct. And so
not been convicted yet.
And so there's a number of cases in Harris County that fit that mold too. And so there was a concern, and that, those types of situations do occur and they can be addressed. What happened was that the bill then morphed into something that created a possibility of more preventive detention rather than less. And it kind of turned the whole thing on its head. The unfortunate part that we ran into, I think, during, and this had to do more with the political polarization that we went through, was there was a constitutional amendment that went alongside that, quite honestly, in the real world, it wouldn't make much of a difference. People not being able to have a bond, the Constitutional Amendment said that the judges could have no bond in a number of new cases. Well, the Constitution in Texas now has that already in a significant number of situations. And if you don't have the opportunity as a judge to have no bond, you can set Jeff's bond at $20 million. Well, that's just as good as having no bond. So judges can do that today, and there's no real way to know why they did it. There's no record that they keep on that. They can just do it. So the constitutional amendment was something that in our party, the Democrats had leverage on. They needed us to pass it. And there was such a desire, I think, to just shut something down and have some clear victory or win or defeat a bill, or in that case, a resolution, that we didn't use our leverage properly to kind of extricate some of the more problematic problems of the bail bill. We had multiple provisions that we could have got lifted into the bail bill. I think that would have mitigated a lot of the unintended consequences of that out in the system, still would have addressed the Damon Allen situation. And I think everybody could have walked away a lot better, and a better public policy could have been crafted. But unfortunately, when you have people pull out to the ends and polarize, and winning at all costs is all that matters, you get very short-sighted. And that's unfortunate because, there was an amendment I carried onto the bail bill. Had we had full participation on the floor that day, that amendment would have significantly reduced the number of cases in which someone could be held in preventive detention. Significantly decreased it. But you got to engage in those conversations. They're not easy. They're difficult. They're tough votes. It would have been a close vote. But if we're not willing to do that and engage in those negotiations and dialogues, then we're going to end up with the worst public policy. And I ended up voting against both those because I think the end results were not where we should have gotten to. I think we could have done a much better job.
So we have time for one more question, and that kind of leads into where I would like to wrap this up, is that, there was a quorum break, right? Democrats left the state for a session and a half-ish. And that really damaged relationships between Republicans and Democrats. And obviously in this field in this topic reigns, at least in the House, a large bipartisan support for these efforts. Where do we go from here? Is there irreparable damage between Democrats and Republicans in terms of getting on the same page on criminal justice reform issues? And how does that look if issues are called onto the ongoing, this current special session, largely on redistricting, or in 2023?
Well, I don't believe that any relationship is irreparable and beyond repair. Some might take some more time than others, but we're all 150 of us are committed. Well, I believe the vast majority of us, certainly Joe and I, are committed to ensuring that these political squabbles take a backseat to the voice of the people of Texas. I mean, we believe strongly, even when we disagree on issues, that it's not our voices that should be heard loudly on the floor of the Texas House, but the voices of the people of Texas. That includes inmates in our penitentiaries. That includes the criminal justice reform issues that we have shined a light on and been their voice. And so I think that while those political squabbles will continue, especially as we head into an election year, and we continue to try to mend some fences and build some bridges that were broken down this summer, I think that criminal justice reform could be the issue that leads us out of this. And this has always been, at least for as long as I've been in the legislature for the past 10 years, there's no other way I could think of it, a really cool bipartisan effort that we're making a real difference in, not only here in Texas, but in Washington, all across this country, putting politics aside and coming together. So I think that as we look forward, this issue needs to continue to be that catalyst to bring people together. And I wouldn't have it any other way. I'm committed to it, and I know Joe is as well.
This collaboration in Criminal Justice Reform Caucus was born out of pretty simple conversations where Jeff and I would talk, and I'd feel strongly about X issue, and he'd look at me and say, "Joe, I hear you," and then he'd come and talk to me about one issue that he was working on, and I would say, "Jeff, I hear you." And currently in our political climate, we've stopped listening to one another. Forget hearing one another. We stopped listening to one another. We started defining ourselves more by, or defining ourselves more by who we're against than what we have in common. And I think the opportunity that Jeff speaks about is the one that we have to seize. and this is the moment to seize it. The notion of restorative justice is one that we've worked on quite a bit, and at the core of restorative justice is not that there's not accountability and things of that nature, but it is restoring and healing the community that has been impacted by this event. So if we're in a political environment that's been impacted by maybe hyperpartisanship or burnt feelings or wrecked relationships, let's use those same principles that we use in restorative justice, which is let's heal, let's move on. How do we heal the community as a whole? I think there's members of the House that have that in their heart and their mind that would like to do that. And if we lead with that, and there's no catchy hashtag for that, and I'm sorry, but if we lead with that, we will succeed, not just on this front, but we'll succeed on so many other fronts for our constituents back home. This is something that I've said many times. Politics is not a spectator sport. We're not here for entertainment. This should be our work should be pretty mundane, and it should be focused on getting good results for the people we serve. And that means those folks who are outside awaiting their family members released from prison, and those who have for a long time been forgotten in the criminal justice system, and also the guards in the prison system. I mean, all these things are holistically need to be thought about, and it's what's beautiful about this arena and this policy arena, and it's why it will allow us to utilize this to lead us out of this kind of negative energy that we're in.
Okay, well, we'll see if that works out. But I thank you both so much for being here with us, and thank you everyone for watching, and thanks for being a part of the Texas Tribune Festival.